All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the ACD, the after chapter discussion for 9.62, where a much quieter chapter, where we're no giant lore dumps of system things, and that just a quiet day at the inn, just like any other day, wondering whatever's going to happen with the solstice. So, I kind of like this chapter. It was nice, quiet. It was a nice, pleasant chapter. It definitely Pirates building up this feeling to me of the pre-end of Volume 5 and the war in Liscor. I haven't really felt something. I haven't really felt, I don't think, a build-up like that since then. It's where everyone knows something's going on, but we're kind of doing this long preparation and so on for it. And so it's a little bit of dread, because my personal pet theory for a long time was that the solstice was just going to happen quietly. Everyone was going to prepare. Nothing was going to happen, but that's clearly not going to happen anymore. So I'm a little scared, because the end of this end of volume things are always big and crazy, and they're more stressful than the quiet in between things. I did like the. I think my favorite things were sort of the manipulation of the immortals into giving presents, and how Ryoka was like, all right, Rhisveri is a jackass, but I know how to tweak him to make the thing happen, and then playing off him against Terry and so on was great. And I think the saddest part of the chapter for me was Theofore and his tail, because I can't see how it's a benefit. I hope it is, but he seems so sad about it, and if someone just kind of randomly forced a tail on me that I couldn't figure out what to do with and just got in the way, that would be kind of unpleasant. So, I'm not going to spend a long time pontificating. Let's jump in to Erin and get your takes on things.
Yes, I also like this chapter. I always enjoy the just daily chapter, and especially I love Erin. I mean, I wouldn't say she behaved like a typical innkeeper again, but more like, yeah, you could you know sometimes you have a quest line and the innkeeper likes you and he gives you something. Maybe it's a bit like this. But I enjoyed it quite a bit. Giving out this stuff, even giving it to people she didn't like, and I can't wait to see what she gives to the goblins and Antinium, because that's gonna be jaw dropping. I bet.
Yeah, that was also true. This whole evolution. I mean, she's never really behaved like a typical innkeeper. So, though sometimes her staff gets her to try. But yeah, I see what you're coming from, but yeah, they did that thing where they called out that I'm not going to give the goblins Antinium things, at least not in front of everybody. But you do know she has something cooked up for the behind the scenes. Mr. Wiggles.
Yeah, so this was just a smaller chapter, obviously, on Pirate Abba's scale, but it was a good one. I would say 8.5 out of 10. I really enjoyed it. It was continuing to build up towards the end, towards the solstice, and now it seems like we're done with Erin's point of view for now, until the solstice, and we're going to go somewhere else, according to the author's note, which I'm really excited about. I want to know what other events they're going to try and connect in with the solstice. Yeah, it was. I liked how we got Rhaldon's lease room explained too. It's been so long since it was introduced, and I've been waiting quite a bit to see exactly how it worked. So that was really nice. And I loved the Lady of the Lake scene and innkeepery tart. It was just really funny, and seeing Erin give out all this stuff to people she, wouldn't even associate with before really kind of just drives home the point of how dangerous this solstice is going to be yet again. So yeah, it was great. I liked it. Hopefully, we get to solstice, within like 5 chapters. Hopefully, there's not a ton more outside of list score, but we'll see. We'll see. It'll be fun. I feel the solstice coming.
Yeah, I do. It's I didn't actually think it was going to be close to the solstice when it happened. Like I kept thinking it was going to be there, but we're actually getting up to, I just realized that we're getting up to not that far away in terms of number of chapters from Earth solstice.
Yeah. So I think
2 months, 10 weeks ish,
yeah.
8 weeks, 8 to 10 weeks, and we actually coincide, which I don't think anyone planned. I don't think Pirate planned it. I didn't think it was going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
But
if we have like 5 more chapters and then a break, that's like a 2 update break. That's like the solstice would be, starting late November basically, and then going into early December. So I think it'll be before the actual winter solstice.
Yeah, but close is my point.
Close.
Razor Shark.
Hello, can you guys hear me fine?
We can hear you loud and clear.
All right. So, general impressions. Against the grain, I think this is like on its own. If the chapter was isolated, I'd give it like 5, 6 out of 10 because it's placed narratively where it is like a 4 out of 10. I think the beginning of the chapter is just bad in where we're at. Like, I think I see what Pirates tried to go for, right? A day in the inn leading up to the solstice and trying to like bridge between last chapter and what's going to come next. And like they said it in the author's notes, it probably should have moved this to like another point. And I agree. It probably, if you're like an editor, like you're going past this book, you change where you place this chapter. And then even then, for what it's trying to be, I just think it's bad. I think you shouldn't include the Rhaldon part at the beginning because honestly, it adds bump nothing. We're showing that he's doing stuff and he's experimenting, right? And that's cool and interesting because like Erin's not paying attention to him, and we also have this falafel stuff. Like it's wandering in-esque stuff, yes, but it's bad because of what we're doing in the story, right? I even seen like some people like the public Redditor comments being like that the last chapter, as good as the Lord Up was, took away from the tension. And in retrospect, I agree. And what this one does, it does the same thing again. It takes away from the tension. It takes away from the feeling that Pirate sets up when Erin does that whole speech trying to let people know how difficult this is. And that culminates again in a really weird slump of a chapter where it doesn't really connect well. I think the ending is fine-ish. I like how Erin does her thing there of giving like the weapons to like all these people. And it has some gravitas to that, but especially the beginning is just, whoa, it's all over the place. There's not really a good narrative through line for me for the chapter. Like, I'm not trying to hate on Pirate for the chapter. I'm trying to be constructive for this. It was not, I do not think it was greatly placed in the whole structure of what is happening for the Solstice event.
Okay.
I think that the beginning part is especially weak with the wandering in menu stuff and learning about the spy agents, having the wandering in menu stuff and the people there, and then going into Rhaldon. It's a weird chapter. And yeah.
All right. Interesting take. My responses to chapters like this tend to be that I like the wandering around and getting all the people's viewpoints. It doesn't detract from the tension to me that much. If anything, it builds this kind of background dread going on. I have not felt like something has been interrupted here because we haven't had there hasn't been, at least for me, there hasn't been a giant action that's been interrupted where business is still going on, but there's also these other threads. And so I think that it's I do I see where you're coming from, where in isolation the chapter is not that great because this chapter sort of has to be in context, at least for me, to be good, because it's this kind of connecting chapter that does what it needs to do, at least to me, and so on. but I'll be kind of interested to see what people are thinking about it, particularly as we remember that people are working in the particularly as people read this in the context of the whole Solstice end of volume arc, as opposed to stop now, wait for a few days, see what's going on next.
Right.
We'll we will now read some comments from people. Linu, the little cat of Sylvania, says, I want to say that the highlight of this chapter for me was Sock Puppet Very when he was following Ryoko around. Imagine this. Yurioko Griffino, the wind killer of Israel, archenemy of Azkarat. Did you mean to insult Azkarash there, or did you misspell the name? I think that's important to know. It was intentional. Good. Archenemy of Azkarat, God's insanity, and all of a sudden 11k worm approaches you while there's a dragon about to poo, and you manage to bargain metric ton of relics from him just so he can feel better than said pooing dragon. I loved it. I actually did too. I always get sad these days when Sock Puppet Rhisveri comes in because I feel like Ryoka has been entirely too deferential to Elendamus and Rhisveri and so on. And it's not like she shouldn't be respectful; they can still squash her, but she entirely too deferential to them. And so I was happy to see her kind of outmaneuver him in that way. Cerber says it was a fine chapter, had a bit of problem with the least room plotline since it feels just introduced with the development being cut off. The chapter feels like a soup of forgotten plotlines Paradaba needed to check off the list. 7 of 10. I can kind of see that at least for the Rhaldon thing. It was the best you can kind of say there, and if you like viewpoints moving around, then and learning lots of kind of interesting things about it, then it was a good break from the rest of things. If you just want to get on with it, then I can see how it would feel a little off there. I, if anything, actually kind of wanted more of it and how they were doing it, because I couldn't always figure out exactly what was going on there, and so I, if anything, wanted more Rhaldon wackening myself. Wovwu says, I really liked Greshal's section. Gershal, the cheese man, I never got the impression that he was way out of his league. He's been in enough serious battles that you think he was a decently reliable officer. Overall, like the chapter, 7.5 of cheese. Yeah, I think part of the point is decently reliable officer is not good enough now. Is I think part of the thing. Although with these giant armies of thousands of people, you have to have some people who are kind of decently reliable. But he's kind of his own force as opposed to being folded into a bigger thing. So he's supposed to have, I think they're trying to have people in that position have a little more weight. So I do think he is out of his weight class here, even if he is perfectly fine and reliable. Erin responds to Razor's critical opinion of the chapter with, yeah, well, that's just like your opinion, man, which is true. They're all of our opinions. So there. And let's go to Mr. Europe so I can stop talking for a minute, and then I'll read the rest of the people's.
Yeah, really enjoyed the chapter. I actually really liked the first part of it. I think there's a tendency to I see the problem with taking it away from it, but on the other hand, there are still several chapters left to Solstice, and I think it would get really I think it would get too much tension, if anything, if we just kept up the serious tone through all leading up to it without any of the usual wandering in shenanigans. It's a hard balance to strike, but I really enjoy the first part of this, so it's working well for me. It's really all the analyzation I can do of that. And always like seeing some planning, even though kind of especially because of all the doom and gloom and Erin wondering if she's going to survive. That makes it even better, kind of, when people are planning for the future and trying out new things, because it's not quite clear on what's going to happen. So are they planning all of this stuff for nothing or not? I just enjoyed that, like the whole thing around that, so to speak.
I tend to agree. I agree with you. I think we're, at least for me, we're not in the climax. We're obviously preparing and building towards it, but we're not in that sort of end of volume, complete bonkers nonsense of nonstop things. An interesting parallel that I just drew from what you just said is a lot of what Erin is doing feels a little bit like writ super large what Ilvris was doing with this anti-Azkarash thing of, I need some powerful people with a bunch of different skills. I don't really know exactly what I'm going to need, but I'm pretty sure I can find a use for people who are in that 40 to 50 range, who can do something, because I have no idea what the heck we're going to need, because there's this big giant thing, but it's even bigger and gianter and less well defined than Ilvris's thing. So that was just a thought I had while listening to what you were saying. In fact, let's see. Mick Chuckles, is that yeah? Anyway, Mick Chuckles. If you don't correct me, that's how I'm going to pronounce your name. Says, maybe we should have built up multiple points of view before we completed Erin's point of view in order to give the calm before the storm for these last two chapters. Fair. I don't know. I have a really bad idea personally. Like, if you did this, would it be better or worse? I don't know. I read. I enjoy. Sidehammer says, I loved having Gershal around and Erin enchanting his sword. I'll be very salty if he dies. I like the introductive Kauraz. I hope he survives too. As a note, I think when we get through the next set of things, we're going to wrap up the general portion. We're going to move on to questions. So if you have any final things, then type them in. Type them in now. We will go through the rest of the things that are going on here. Dart Time says the Wagon section is kind of like back when we had Gary Cookie chapter before the siege. Reasonable. I think it was, maybe it'll end up being more connected. I felt like it was a little less directly connected to the Solstice myself than the Gary's cooking chapter was, because he's kind of off doing that thing. Whereas it felt like Gary was cooking as part of the pre-siege things. Razor Shark says, I like the multi-POV and moving viewpoints. It adds lenses and interactions leading up to the Solstice. The execution of that idea for this chapter in the context of the arc was just not done great. We can have multiple jumps and shenanigans, a way that flows better from one point to the other, so the chapter as a whole falls flat to me. That's fair. I like that. I like that. I feel like that's a reasonably nuanced view of the chapter. And we'll end up this section with Bleach Soul.
Yeah, hi everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, all right. Yes, I liked the chapter fine. I thought it was pretty nice, easygoing chapter. Though I have to say that I'm missing the global implication of the Solstice, because it's so focused on the score and the end. For instance, I'm lacking viewpoints from the Antinium who are fighting Sleepy, for instance. Sleepy is a huge part of. We know he's already awakening, and he's gonna make something bigger and better than Krellers. So we should get also something about the other places in the world, instead of only focusing on the score and stuff, because it feels local instead of apocalyptic global events. I understand Casigna, whatever her name is, that she wants revenge on Erin and stuff, but it feels, for somebody who is huge as a god, it feels so localized. And yeah, and besides, I don't want Gershal to die. I'm still upset about the driver. The only normal knight of the Solstice died. I think it was not good. Otherwise, I like the humor. I liked the interactions. It's always fun. And I hate Love. I hate him with passion. Yeah, that's it.
I think Lulv is that person that everyone loves to hate. So I had a couple of thoughts about when you just said that. I don't know if yes, Sleepy is going to be picking things up. I don't know if Sleepy is doing anything in time for the Solstice. I think remember that this is a big event, but it's not the climax of the Wandering Inn, at least, to my knowledge. So there's going to be a volume 10 and more, and probably. So there's some of these things that we're talking about happening don't necessarily come in, aren't going to be there, even though they've been building. They're not actually going to happen until a later volume. So we may or may not see Sleepy as part of this. I think also part of Erin's plan, as you pointed out, Casigna has this vengeance idea against Erin. Also, Erin is intentionally focusing it on Lisker with that whole the gods must be challenged, and I can bring them all here I can bring her here where I'm ready for her, and so on. So I think that's a little bit. I think it's deliberate on both their parts to make it local. That said, I agree with you. It'd be nice to see what's going on in other places, because the shades rose from the dead, the wisps rose in other places, and so on and so forth. So I think seeing what the rest of the world is like would absolutely be a wonderful thing to have. And maybe with the end of Erin's viewpoint, we'll get some of that. So thanks everyone who commented on all the reactions, good and bad, to the chapter. And we're going to move on to specific questions. After all of this grand talk about multiple things, we're going to dive in with question 1 as a little bit of a palate cleanser. Is what can Theofore do with his new tail? My thoughts on Theofore, as you're typing up your answers, is I feel so sad, like I said, for Theofore. As I said in reactions, he's just trying to do his job, and he's got this tail now that he has no idea what to do with, and it's probably just going to wreak havoc with his balance on being an assassin. It's painful. Mick Chuckles says dust. Mr. Europe says make Menelit jealous. Wolfwu has an idea.
All right, so I have a harebrained theory that Theofore is like a human version of a doom bearer, and so the whole point of him having this bad luck, because that's a sort of his thing, he's Theofore the Luckless. I think that he's gathering up a bunch of bad luck, and the reason that he's still alive after everything is because he uses that to make good luck later when it counts. And so that's what my whole theory about Theofore is, that he's basically a doom bearer. He just doesn't know it.
So he's cursed. He's got some luck curse, like or skill like Rickle or Nears or Doom Bearers or things. Okay, I'll buy that. Aliast says panda eating popcorn. Sir Bear, what do you think?
So it's another limb. You can communicate with it as said by as used by Sirius and Teriarch later. You can use it for stability as the Drake use. I think it was mentioned somewhere that Drake that lose their tail have some problem with stability. So we can assume it's a good support for that stuff. And obviously, because there's some people listening here that want to know, you will enjoy rereading Mating Ritual 1. I think you will enjoy that.
Fair enough. I'll point out that drakes lose their stability when they have a tail because they're built like drakes and are built to have a tail for their balance. And humans are not built to have a tail for balance. So it's going to need a little bit of thinking there, or figuring it out. But I do have hope that it'll work. Mr. Wiggles.
He's going to use it like a pogo stick, and then he's going to be the most mobile assassin to ever live. And he'll be like, wow, I can't believe I ever doubted the power of this tail. And he'll live happily ever after.
I'm going to predict that is not true. Hopefully the happily living after part will be true.
Wow.
But the rest of it, I think you're wrong, with the greatest of respect.
Wow. I have never been so humiliated. I'm going to go sit in my corner.
Well, just wait for my reaction to your next response then. Oh, I'm sorry. All right, we have some more responses, and then we'll move on from this, since this is a silly little question and deserves these silly little answers. Dark Time Guru says, I think Theofore I am. I salute you. Eteron says, new tail means probably even better balance when you can control it. Hopefully. Sidehammer says he can have it stepped on and cut off, but it might help with falling and landing on his feet. Eliast says tails are an erogenous zone. He can have a really good time. He just doesn't know it yet. See the direction to Mating Rituals 1. Mr. Europe says actually you don't know how attractive his tail is from a Drake perspective. He might be able to pick up chicks. Who knows? Let's wait until we hear some perspectives on that. Dart Time Goose follows up with, it foreshadows his eventual employment as an instaff since Ishkur is the head server of Tales and Fables. We're definitely getting into it here. Eliast says Menelit seemed jealous. So, I'd forgotten that it was actually in the text that Menelit seemed jealous. And Theofore's tale foreshadows his position as a sub in the 18+ fanfiction I'm writing about him and Ressa. And we're off to the races. Linu, the little cat of Slovenia, says, I want to officially unhumiliate Mr. Wiggles and say that tails are kind of cool, but only if they're cat-like tails. I'm not sure why that unhumiliates Mr. Wiggles. All right. So, we're going to move on to the next question of, will Magnolia poach some of Perorn's mercenaries to add to her staff? You can also just remark on what your favorite new species for Magnolia to add is there. And Bleach Soul, we are going there. Bleach Soul says Mag's ability will probably unite the species. Sidehammer would like to bonk Eliast. And Mr. Wiggles has a response to this. Go for it, Mr. Wiggles. I'm going to rest my voice before I respond.
So, I'm not sure if she'll intentionally try and poach any of Perorn's mercenaries because, I could see it happening. But at the same time, the species I do want to see her poach the most is Stitchfolk. I want to see what a Stitchfolk would give other species in her employ. Would it give them the ability to sew on limbs, or would it give some of the powers related to whatever cloth type they have on? Because that's kind of the Stitchfolk one is the one I'm really curious about. Also, Selphids. I don't think anything would happen if she got Selphids. Maybe they would be better at telepathy, but they wouldn't know it simply because no one really uses telepathy outside of the mines. So yeah. Stitchfolk is who I want to see the most.
Also, telepathy didn't seem like it was as intrinsic to Selphids. I mean, they had to get classes to get them, I think, unless they're talking to people inside their own heads. So, but yeah. Also, what do you give Stitchfolk? I mean, they if you give them a tail, they can have tails if they want a Drake tail already. So we'll see. Wofu says, I hope so, and I hope it literally just turns a human into a centaur, or a reverse centaur will give a human with a horse's head. Okay. Linu, the little cat of Sylvania, says all of them. Big Chungus has not infinite amount of monies, so she can buy at least 100 centaurs. Okay, that's not all of them, but she can buy 100. Almighty Nub says, what would a Stitchfolk gain that their nature doesn't already allow them to have? Yep, that was kind of what I was asking. They can already just sew on its tail and stuff. I'm sorry, I hadn't read yours before I come up with that. So apparently we have the same thoughts. Eliast says, Selphid might give the ability to control their biochemistry or heal wounds faster. There are things Selphids could provide that would actually potentially be really powerful if you won the lotto. Mick Chuckles says, well, that would be pretty cool. I agree. Controlling your own biochemistry would be kind of amazing ability. And Mr. Wiggles has a comment about the Stitchfolk.
So, in terms of what they would gain, obviously body parts aren't very useful for them, but something like breath attacks, that would be good for them because you can't just, I don't know if you could stitch in some kind of gland in your throat that would allow you to do breath attacks, but I'm pretty sure it'd be really complicated. So breath attacks, and then null noses, their sense of smell. I think that would be something that Stitchfolk just don't inherently have. So I do think Stitchfolk could get some good stuff. It's just a little more iffy if it will actually be useful for them. I
will absolutely buy those. I think those are great points. Great ideas for the best things to get for a Stitchfolk. Almighty Nub says the Selphas would provide mind-related stuff. Sir Bear says Stitchfolk can't use wings, so no. All right. Let's move on from there. This is another one to an interesting. Sorry. Let's say, what did Erin's enchantment to Gershal's sword actually do? I don't know, because as you pointed out, as whoever wrote this question pointed out, it does makes a lot of cool colors, but who the heck actually knows what it does? And I don't have any idea. So, Mr. Wiggles, what's your thought?
So it's kind of like it's like the whole essence of things are wrapped up in their colors, right? You know, when Erin was trying to get the happiness from wow, I'm blanking on his name. Akira? The kids ball. Yeah,
I thought it was
Akira.
Visma's. I thought it was,
Or
wasn't it Visma's
was it-
ball?
It was one of them. It was either
One of the
Akira or
kids.
Visma. But when she was trying to get the happiness from the ball, you know, it kind of got rid of all of the happiness in the ball. And I think she's doing something similar here with her memory. You know, she's getting the essence of what makes Zell and putting it into the sword, you know? So I think it's going to make that sword super duper strong and probably anti-magic, because those are two things that we've seen majorly from Zell. Is he's, you know, completely, he's next to indestructible. He has a lot of resistances to stuff, and he has an anti-magic slash. So I kind of see the enchantment giving those two properties to the sword, which is cool. That would be a really strong sword.
I think it's also interesting in that he was the essence of Zell, an unarmed combatant being put into a sword. Will be interesting. Be interesting to see too. Let's see. McChuckles says, I think it summons an entity like Zell Shivertail. Anti-magic, really cool though. Wafu says it might help people hold the line so long as Gershal is present. Right, because Zell is what is a line holder general variant kind of thing. Dart Time Goose says, in other words, it helps him no Zell attacks. Reasonable. All right. So, nice short one. Let's skip question 4 for the moment, since we've done a lot of short questions, and we'll go for a bigger question of Erin has saved these weapons for the moment, not bringing them out for previous emergencies. Was that the right call, or could she have helped more by giving some away sooner? And what is she saving the adamantium armor for? I think that I kind of expected her to give at least a couple of them out to different people, particularly the goblins and Antinium, before now. I mean, I think that she hasn't really had a great chance, at least for me, to bust open the vaults and whatnot. And it does feel kind of abrupt, but I feel like that she's gone, oh holy shit, maybe I should have been utilizing these a little more before now, but and I don't know about these people I'm giving to, but now is the time, as she says, don't leave anything on the ground for Casigna to steal at the end. It's break them out because there may not be a tomorrow kind of thing. So yeah, that's my thought on it. And Mr. Wiggles has his customary response.
So I guess my answer to this is like, what could she have given out earlier? You know, I'm trying to find it right now, but she got. Geez, where did she get this skill? I'm trying to figure out when she got the access to the rest of the doors. Oh, she got it in 9.07. Okay, so, but she didn't explore it a lot until 9.0, until later on. So I think, maybe the only thing that she could have given out earlier on is something to do with dealing with Head Snatcher. I think that's like the one missed opportunity for, giving out some weapons earlier on. But other than that, I think she hasn't had a huge opportunity to give out these weapons and have it mean something. And right now, if she had given them out earlier, she wouldn't have them for this very moment. And this moment is the one she's been expecting to happen. She's known since she was dead, basically, that Casigna is going to come back and come after her because the gnomes told her. So, she's been waiting for this very moment to give out these swords and such. And I do think it was the right call. And
That's fair.
in terms
go
of
on.
the adamantium armor, I think it's just, she could give it to some of the gnolls, she could give it to some of the Antinium, one of the goblins, whoever. I don't think it's saved specifically for someone, unless, it could be saved for one of the Knights of Solstice. Now that I think about it, one of the Solstice Knights could really use that well, especially because not all of them have, what's it called, Demas metal armor yet.
That's true. Although it might end up being the Solstice Knights, I think, are oddly enough, they're a little new for the armor. We've seen that giving people things that are vastly more powerful than their level sometimes has a detrimental effect, like Ghazi's armor. And Ghazi's armor is terrifying given the fact that it's still over leveled for her. But yeah, that I think that would have been something to be careful of for the armor. For armor and the Solstice Knights is whether they're how you match that up.
Yeah, you're absolutely right with that, by the way. But that's probably one of the reasons why she didn't ever give these away, is because as much as it's kind of like anti-Erin, she has been thinking for a long time people need to level up. And she knows that if she just gives these weapons and armors out, they're not going to level up. They're just going to be handicapped by having this superior armor. But I don't think she's worried about right now for this upcoming event whether or not people level up from it. She's worried about them surviving it. So if she gives one of her knights the armor specifically for this event, I think she would ask for it back afterwards, simply because they won't level anymore for normal everyday encounters. They would need to go and do even more dangerous stuff, which is a possible recipe for disaster.
That's
I have a question about the armor. Is it adamantium armor the Dullhans? Whose armor was it? Because the armor needs to be able to fit person, right? So that might be why she can't give it to anyone, because it's I don't remember who the armor's owner was.
they've had some there have been a lot of the power magic stuff seems to be refittable or refitting to people. This kind of has a little bit of that, but yeah, I do think it was Dullahan's.
Yeah.
There. Let's see. Wolfwu says Erin comes across kind of possessive. She didn't even want to show off her other gardens at first, so she likes to keep things for herself. She wasn't thinking she was going to die. I think she'd have just kept them for herself. It's kind of hypocritical for her to judge Terry after she waited for so long. I don't know. I mean, remember, this isn't waiting for so long. I mean, there hasn't been a long time here. It's been a couple of months, and it's been a couple of months, right? It hasn't been it's not like she's been sitting on them for years. She doesn't even really know what she has. And so I don't agree with that necessarily, but I can kind of see where you're coming from, particularly when if you're thinking about the sort of amount of words that she's had them for instead of the amount of time. It's been a while. Moerchen says it was even mentioned that if they get too strong a weapon, the fools would think they're heroes, and Erin doesn't want heroes. That is also true. Sir Bear has something to say here.
The big reason she didn't give them is because she feels the stuff doesn't belong to her. We see it at the end of this chapter. She's pretty much asking for permission. Give me permission to use those weapons, those tools to use them to fight people. So by giving them away, she probably feels she doesn't. respect those people that are honored by the armor, the sword, and all of that. Obviously, Rag is a massive exception to that rule because they have a special relationship. But yeah, I think it's pretty much the main reason she didn't give stuff away.
That makes sense to me. I'll note that Kineas and Sidehammer both agree with that. Brack Giraffe is writing a comment. I'm going to wonder on that basis of things is how much of this is Erin actually going to get back? I'm just going to toss out maybe half. Brack says, I didn't think it was about him waiting. It seemed like how he was expecting payment or a trade. Are you, when you say he there, do you mean Teriarch? Okay, yes, regarding Teriarch. And I see Eliast writing, asking if she's getting any of it back presupposes Erin lives. Doom. Yeah, I understand there's a lot of indications of it or not. I think Erin's going to live through this, partly because I'm eternally hopeful, and partly because I think that even though we've seen that sort of the world and narratives can survive without her, I think that there's too much going around for, to have Erin come back and then go away again permanently at the end of Volume 9. Elias follows up saying, I think it's good for the story if she doesn't, TBH. Which is the reverse of my thoughts, but is perfectly valid opinion to have on it. Brack says, time for the Deadlands again, because Signon wants a chest rematch. The very lonely Deadlands, unless they start getting remade again. I don't think people are getting back in until satisfied with Drevish's redesign. All right. So following up the weapons, let's go back to question 4 of, were you surprised to learn that Rhisveri is more generous than Teriarch? And Elias does comment that Erin has reached the status of a bit of a deus ex machina. So I agree with Elias that we'll have to keep that from happening as things go on. Moerchen says soul strip chess. It's an unpleasant thought. So anyone? All right. I don't see people having much of a reaction to whether to the relative generosity of Rhisveri and Teriarch. But Elias says not even a little. Terry's always been greedy, whereas Rhisveri wants to be liked by people he respects. Linu says Sneak has lots to give. We'll also combine this with the question of is Teriarch a war profiteer? Since I realized that those two kind of go together. I hadn't thought about it like that, so I'm going to catch my breath a little bit. I see Eliast, Ninette Partisan, and Mr. Wiggles and Lena are all writing things. This will be great. Mr. Wiggles, what do you have to think on this?
I'm not too surprised that Rhisveri is more generous than Teriarch. Teriarch has always been extremely threadbare with what he gives away. Meanwhile, Rhisveri leads a kingdom and he gears out knights on the regular. You know, he has a bunch of great knights that are in his kingdom and he personally helps to give them good gear and good weapons and all of that. And so it's like, yeah, Rhisveri knows that if he has allies and they need something, he is definitely willing to give them, you know, not the top of the line stuff. This is still just true gold weaponry that is not the top of his it's not the most prized possession in his armory, but he's definitely willing to give that. Meanwhile, Teriarch has never just been someone who gives things out, and it's kind of his whole philosophy, you know. He's always been like, okay, if I give you something, you're never going to learn and you're going to stagnate and it won't help in the long run. So it doesn't surprise me that Teriarch is much more thrifty than Rhisveri is. But it does kind of surprise me how Teriarch is acting a lot like a war profiteer here. It's not exactly the same. Let's be clear here. He is. It's a trade situation. He's going to give you something good, but he just wants something in return. So it's not exactly war profiteering, because at the end of the day, he is giving probably more than he's receiving. But it is surprising to see him act like this when he knows the threat of the gods. But I guess Teriarch is just a really, really big hoarder, and he can't bear to pass things off without getting something in return.
He can't. I also as you alluded to, Teriarch is terrified of doing anything, and I don't think he's gotten over that. In spite of his like, I'm gonna go out and I'm gonna do things now. Really, I am. He's really scared of doing anything, and giving out things is doing things. McChuckles says, no, he's not. No, he's not surprised, and yes, unless he returns them. The war profiteering. Bedless Sleeper says Teriarch is a boomer loner who lives by himself in a cave for thousands of years. Aliast, following up on the like people he respects, says where respects is kind of vague, because despite Ryoka's behavior, he still respects her in the correct way, whereas I think he probably wouldn't respect, say, the queen of his kingdom. Fair. And follows up by saying, can someone clarify what Teriarch did exactly? It was kind of unclear. Was he saying he was kind of going to repair the busted things in Erin's garden and then trade them for magic items he considers less valuable but less likely to wear out? He's trading more stable magic for rarer, older magic. That was my reading of it, is that they're old relics that have interesting magic on them, and I don't think he has a plan to repair them so much as he says he's a collector and a hoarder, as he's said and other people have pointed out. And so he's like, these are really interesting old things that I want to have in my hoard. Here, have something that's a little less obscure and strange and won't break on you after 20 minutes of fighting with it. And so I actually feel like in that sense it's less war profiteering and more kind of a fair trade of, it's something that he wants at least as much, and he's giving out something that is, in fact, if he's to be trusted, more valuable to Erin and her friends than the stuff that he's getting. Although part of me is sad about not learning what all of the really cool items do and whatnot. Sir Bear has something to say.
I think, as Wiggle said, Rhisveri is offering cheap stuff that can easily be made, while Terry is preserving what I would like to call memories, like he says also. You want to keep stuff to preserve the memory. He's doing a full British museum, if I were to compare. He steals stuff. He doesn't show them to people. He steals stuff in quote. He doesn't show them to people, but he wants to keep their memory. I think he got affected a lot by Sheeta's garden, and he doesn't want really to admit it that much. He wants to make his own garden of sanctuary to honor people.
I definitely agree with you on the not wanting to admit things. That is absolutely true. Linu says Teriarch is dragon sword stuff. They're greedy, very greedy. Like, imagine Teriarch is made out of metal. What are swords made out of? Metal. What are armors made out of? Metal. What is Teriarch made out of? Metal. Teriarch equals metal equals Black Sabbath equals witches. Thus, by going with this logic, Teriarch has to give Erin lots of stuff despite being a war profiteer. However, when it comes to Rhisveri, he has a brain of a snake. Snakes have small brains, thus Rhisveri is dum-dum and will give away a lot just to make himself happy. Screw the consequences. Bedless Sleeper says, I'm more surprised by how Teriarch seems to not be directly preparing for the battlefield through magic circle preparations or collecting items to prepare, or maybe he is, but off-screen. Brack Giraffe says, Teriarch isn't in a place to support an army in the same way Rhisveri is. I don't think Terry even saw his collection as potential weapons of war until confronted here. I'll withhold full judgment of Terry's character until we see how it plays out, and his take is something Erin can't use right now and seems like a trade they will both profit from regardless. Bedless Sleeper shrugs. Aliast says he's not offering awful trades, but it's still a dick move. there on the principle of the gods are coming. You were willing to up and try to murder Eldavin for being associated with with Casigna. She's coming. You should open the vaults a little more, I assume. Tinius says, with Teriarch, I felt like he was looking for an excuse to give things more than really want those weapons. He might be able to repair them eventually, but it would mean a lot of time and effort to the point where it might not be worth it. All pretty reasonable. Let's see. So back to Magnolia, because what I'm saying is Magnolia's new skill useful to her? I assume that the question for this is it useful to her personally, or does it just empower her staff? I would actually say that empowering her staff is really incredibly useful to her, at least once they figure out how the heck to use it, which obviously they haven't yet, so at least for now it seems to be a bad thing. And Mr. Wiggles, what's your response to this?
So I know in the chapter, the people who were affected by it were complaining, and I've seen some people outside the chapter say it's not very good, but honestly, this skill is completely busted. It's one of the best skills she could possibly have gotten at this point, and it, especially because of how high level she is, and so how pronounced the effects are. Like, a gnoll being able to just breathe dragon breath, something that only specific old-blooded drakes can do. That's insane. Giving humans and other species gnoll smelling, which is something they can easily incorporate into their anti-assassin training. That's huge. Giving potentially wings to people and the ability to fly to people who never could before is huge. You know, all these changes are huge, and it affects all of her employees. All of them. That's an insane skill. It's just crazy. So yeah, that's my thought on this. This skill is crazy nuts. It's insanely good. And it only gets better with more species. You know, sometimes you'll get some weird things from a species that aren't super useful for everyone, but it only gets better when you have more species under your employ. So yeah, crazy good skill.
Absolutely. Once they figure out how to use it, I totally agree. This is bonkers. It's completely off the wall. And also if she gets more powerful people from a given species, does it help? If she has more people in a species, does it make it more likely to transfer that gift? Who knows? But even just what we've seen is, I mean, just Ressa is going to be bonkers once she learns how to do things. And yes, I absolutely agree. Almighty Nub says, let's be real, the first owner of that skill owned a brothel. Elias says people who don't realize the skill is massive aren't paying attention. Yep, everyone is here on this. Sir Bear says Null's sense of smell and hearing is useful for cleaning and checking stuff. Human charisma is useful for polite and competent staff with poetry and singing. I'm not sure that an ability to make tongue twisters is the same as charisma and politeness. So your mileage may vary there. Elias says this skill gives so many free buffs. Right now, she's only focused on collecting species. What qualifies as staff? How many people can she hire to do how much and spread this buff throughout her lands? Can she directly employ the watch, soldiers, merchants, or diplomats? Skill actually insane once she's over the learning curve, and Magnolia knows. And apparently, so do a lot of participants in this discussion. Bedless Sleeper says, how the heck does that work anyways? It is lore drakes have a lightning, poison, icy mist sack thing inside them, isn't it? I mean, it obviously, answering your question, the thing grows new body parts on people, so presumably it grows whatever they need to, or magics it up. Linu, oh, it was just thanking for explanation. That is also my answer to Bedless Sleeper's question of what the heck are they breathing out from if they're human, is the skill grew them a breath sac. Idaron says, I agree with Sir Wiggleton the Third. Mr. Wiggles also says skills completely ignore reality to make things happen. They do. Dart Time Goose says Reynolds probably has a sack. Sir Bear says, also, let's try counting how many leveling species exist. There's also beastkin, and who knows if each animal is different or if they're combined as one beastkin. Fair point. My suspicion is that they're going to count as different ones. Linu says, I think that Magnolia can pretty much now become a Pokemon trader. This is my legit take. She can mix and combine her staff. Also, she doesn't have have that much control over who gets what, so she does get these kind of random combinations. Ellie says Magnolia doesn't think it's limited to leveling species either. I guess that's true, given her going on trying to hire Terry and Telediveren. My suspicion, Elias, is that it also doesn't work for leveling species. Is that it's not limited to leveling species because, the boon of the guest can give Ryoka traits to people who's now completely divorced from the system, at least in terms of leveling. So my guess is you're right that it will, but we'll have to see when she gets the first one. Dart Time says, I'm mostly interested in seeing what happens if she hires the unmarked coach. So, Ginny? That's another great great species request for people to have there. Let's see. All right, that looks like we might actually get through all of these without going much over an hour. So let's see if we can get through all the questions today. What are some of the ways we'll end on the doom and gloom questions? So first we'll say, what are the since we talked about Rhaldon's thing, does anyone have any quick ideas for how to make his lease door more useful for him? I don't have a lot of ideas, although I had a lot of questions about the lease door, when they said the Antinium work on it, did the Antinium go out to the wagon to work on it? Can they work on it from the inn? Do they have to unlease the room, work on it in the room, and then lease the room? Because they talked about Antinium working. A little hard to say. Anyway, Mr. Wiggles.
So, first off, on what you just said, the Antinium definitely have to work on the room through the door that Rhaldon has, because you can't access that room in Erin's Inn while it's leased. And I don't think you can just unlease it, release it. I don't think it probably has a cooldown on when you can release something. So I think if they want to work on the interior of the room, they have to go through Rhaldon's door. But on the subject of the question, what it needs right now is stabilization, right? There are ways to make stabilization frames. I forget exactly what they're called, but there are engineering ways to make something completely stable in an environment. And you could do that, but I think the in-world way of doing this is just to get some kind of enchantment on the door to stabilize it, like completely stabilize it. I think so. Going to an enchanter and getting that done would work the best.
I like your plan. I like your thinking here but yeah, they Rhaldon did even mention that. I think it was Rhaldon that mentioned, we shouldn't be too hard to, rig up some sort of gyroscope. I think he's underestimating how hard it is to make a good one. But yes, there are ways to do that. Bedless Sleeper says you can literally make a real infinite energy machine with the lease door. Has a circle track and a ball. It falls down left side, goes up the other side. It loops infinitely for free energy. GG's. I've always kind of wondered a little bit about that. I suspect that it would drain mana or something, but yeah. There's definitely some engine capabilities there. Wavu says build the door on a rotating swivel. If bandits attack him, he can let him in the maroon, close the door behind them, and start rolling the door around. Bedless Sleeper continues. You can use it as a punishment room. Throw baddies in there. Close the door. Spin it around for an hour. Open door, and they are either really dizzy or paste. Linu says Rhaldon should use it to search for uranium, the room, then quickly get back to wandering in and change it to atomic bomb. Then once Casigna comes in, she goes, I'm the goddess of death. You can't defeat me. What do you think, you've atomic bomb? Rhaldon, I do something. I can't figure out what that emote is. Yes. Casigna tries to run away. Rhaldon detonates the atomic bomb. Salus activates his friendly fire off skill, and the only people that die are Casigna and Visma. Brilliant plan, except the only thing is, my suspicion is that it only works for himself. His friendly fire skill. Although maybe not. Bedless Sleeper says Linu is on something here. I thought that was onto something here. Lino says, my plan is in ruin. And Moerchen has something to say before we move on to the last question and wrapping up. The last question, so you can think about this, is, Moerchen says, no, I assume, not trying to say something. All right then, let's move on to our last question of who are you most excited to see die during the solstice? This was a very sad question for me. Don't make me too sad, please. Linu says, Erin, let's go. Mr. Wiggles has an answer.
I'm not excited to see anyone die. How about that? I don't get excited to see people dying. Jeez. But I do expect, some death, and I think the most expected one for me is Chaldean. But it could happen or it couldn't. I don't know.
That's fair. I'm also not excited to see. I'm not even excited to see the people I don't like die during the solstice. I want them to die, but I don't want I want Love, I want Zidijin, so forth, people to die, but not during the solstice, really. Bleach Soul says Love. Dark Time says Yazdil. Great choice there. There is zero chance he's actually going to die this solstice, though, if he's even involved. Bedless Sleeper says Chaldean. Tessa. Zombie guy should have killed her. Teriarch. I don't want Tessa to die. Tessa's such a... I have such a soft spot in my heart for Tessa. A Bleach Soul has some responses.
Yes, it's always it always confuses me that people say they need less people to die to understand the consequence or the gravity of the situation. But I always refer to the Harry Potter ending, where lots of people died and some of them with nothing. And I still, with regards to Maviola, I still think her death was quite. I was not satisfied at all. So I mean, if some death's gonna be, it has to be somebody impactful, and I don't want anybody to die again. But actually, I don't want either Tessa to die. Tessa still has she has to go through her own arc for hopefully. But I don't. Maybe maimed, but not killed. But I don't know. I don't know. I'm not so fan of just killing people off to put to make the situation gravity. I mean, if the character had nowhere to go, there's no growth left, and there is no plot relevance to the character. For instance, Jelacqua. Yeah, she's not an adventurer anymore. She wanna just marry and sit down. So she has no plot relevance anymore, except she's a friend of Erin and stuff. But her can be expendable, for instance. But if somebody I don't know, someone whoever, like Lionette, she can't die, for instance. She's very relevant, and yeah. So that's it. I mean, if you want to kill somebody, kill the ones who have no plot relevance, or someone significant with no plot relevance or character arc any longer.
Okay. Let's see where we are. Linu says, oh wait, I failed. New list. Neravia, Azkarash, Belavir, Ostius, Haven, Quitail, Coratine, Yazdil, and Rhisveri too. Kynia says Casigna. Bedless Sleeper says Maviola's death was lame. Linu says, I need Atheus and Blighted Kingdom to die during the solstice. See how bad it is. If even Blighted Kingdom dies, entire kingdom all at once due to God's influence, that means the gods are powerful, and everyone, even demons, needs to take them seriously. Heck, entire world will see how serious the issue is. Yes, I'm on heavy dose of cadmium. Bed the Sleeper says, Relk isn't plot anymore, but him dying would be dumb. Dark Time says, Mercia dies since the Doomlayer plotline is over. Moerchen says, Relk or Embria, a grass tongue has to go, or the character arc of the other. All right. I think that is. I don't have any super clever wrap up thoughts here. So as is the custom when I am hosting a discussion, I have written a fourth entry. Moerchen says Seaborn. I have written a fourth entry for the Inktober songwriting contest, and if you want to leave now, because I am about to attempt to sing it. So, what this is something that is actually very topical, because it is a song that no bard will ever sing, I assume. But it's what would have happened if, say, the Grand Design had consulted Numb Tongue as one of his as one of the consultant. Let me switch over to the microphone that actually works better for this. That will take me a second. Device. There we go. We're back into the realm of metal. I also need to pull up my lyrics. So, I'm sorry Mr. Wiggles had to go. I know he likes these two. So, I am the Grand Design. Nope, the recording hasn't stopped. We're going to keep on recording. We're going to stop the recording after this.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, good. All right. In that case, sorry, editor, you'll have a little bit to chop out here. I am the Grand Design. Ista, Canus, Ista, Canus, Ista, Canus, Ista, Canus. Nobody knows that I exist. Nobody knows that I was made without a choice. Yet every night you go to sleep and pray that you will hear my voice. I am the Grand Design, know every rock and mind. I stand in judgment on the deeds of every soul. I bear a name no one recalls, for he was eaten by your dead and grasping foes. And so I'm left to find a purpose within the levels I bestow. Oh, be you king or be you peasant, I will tally up your due. From your accomplishments and chance to your commitment to the dance, I will deliver what is coming to you. I am the Grand Design, know every rock and mind. I stand in judgment on the deeds of every soul. I'm on your side, but don't take heart. I root for everyone who lives and who takes part. Just want to see you level, just want to watch you climb, whether it's for good deeds or a bandit's vicious crime. I have decided what I'm after. I am the rules, I am the board. I give you power, give you skills, I give you everything, and this is my reward. To all you fools who seek to meddle, I will show you what I have in store. There will be no favoritism, for I will suffer it no more. I am the Grand Design, know every rock and mind. I stand in judgment on the deeds of every soul.
I am the grand design, know every rock and mind. I am the grand design, perfect in every line. I am the grand design of Easter Canus, Easter Canus, Easter Canus, Easter Canus, Easter Canus, Easter Canus. I am the grand design. Thank you all for listening, and goodbye, Craig.